explosion sounded like a firecracker snapping through the trees. One bright pop, then a spray of water flashing across Karen's backyard jungle of palms, ferns, and neon lawn flamingos. Her surveillance drone didn't just fall. It nosedived straight into her pool like a suicidal metal pigeon. And there she was, Karen, floating on a glitter-pink swan, wearing a blinding gold kimono and a sun hat big enough to shade half the cul-de-sac, shrieking as her precious security asset fizzled underwater. Neighbors peeked over fences. Birds scattered from the oak canopy. The whole green leafy world went quiet. But the crazy part wasn't the crash. It's what Karen saw in my hands, right before the drone died. 3 weeks earlier, the first warning sign floated right over our maple trees, a shiny black drone drifting past the treetops and dropping into our backyard like it owned the air. It didn't hesitate. It angled its camera straight at Ellie, who was reading under the pergola sunlight flickering through leaves onto the patio stones. That was the moment I realized Karen had finally taken her obsession airborne. She lived 2 houses down in the most obnoxious home on the block. Lime shutters, rainbow, wind spinners, flamingos everywhere like a carnival crashed into a botanical garden. And she controlled the HOA with the same chaotic energy. One-sentence personality. She was loud, fluorescent, and dangerously convinced she was the hero of this neighborhood. One-sentence motive. She believed every inch of our green leafy cul-de-sac existed to obey her version of order. I walked through the breezy corridor of oak trees and knocked on her door. Karen answered, wearing a glitter-blue robe, feathered slippers, and sunglasses so big they reflected half the yard. In one hand, a fishbowl-sized wine glass. In the other, the lime-green drone controller. "I know it flew over your yard," she said, before I could speak. "Routine safety inspection. It was filming my daughter." She shrugged. "If you've got nothing to hide, you shouldn't mind." Her smile didn't move. The trees rustled behind me. And right then, surrounded by all that peaceful greenery, I understood this wasn't about rules. It was about power. The citations began the very next morning, arriving in a neat, bright yellow stack tucked under my doormat like gifts from a deranged fairy. Improper grill cover, garden tools visible from street view, unauthorized decorative rock. Each one felt more absurd than the last, and every time I stepped outside, the gentle breeze shaking the maple leaves overhead couldn't soften the feeling of being watched. The drone didn't return immediately, but the buzzing presence lingered in my mind. Angela stopped hanging laundry under the trellis because she felt eyes. Ellie refused to read outside unless the pergola curtains were drawn tight. Even the neighbors' kids wouldn't run through the sprinklers beneath the oaks anymore. I worked from home most days, which meant I saw every envelope the moment it arrived. Karen's way of reminding me she could still reach us from behind her flurry of flamingos and lawn ornaments. By the end of the week, the notes, tickets, and warnings had blurred into one long accusation, and we all knew the drone wasn't finished. The drone came back just after sunset, hovering low, drifting between branches, its shadow sliding across the ivy, climbing our fence. I spotted it in the window reflection while locking up. Ellie's bedroom light was on upstairs, just a warm square of gold against the green backdrop of the treetops, and the drone crept toward it like a curious insect. I stepped onto the deck. "Back off," I warned. It lifted slightly, then eased closer, camera pointed directly at her window. That was the moment the quiet turned into pressure. 2 houses over, Tom caught the drone above his grill and muttered that he'd received a complaint the next morning about unpresentable appearances. He didn't need to say the rest. Everyone knew Karen had targeted him too. Then came the cameras. 3 new ones appeared on her property, 2 mounted on her porch like jeweled security sentinels, and 1 perched atop a tall pole in her backyard, blinking red through the leaves at night. I didn't dig out my old equipment because I wanted revenge. I did it because I recognized a pattern, one I'd seen overseas, when surveillance creeps in through the smallest cracks, and Karen had shoved her way through every one of them. The neighborhood's mood shifted. Conversations near mailboxes went quiet whenever the wind carried a mechanical hum. People trimmed hedges cautiously, moved slower, looked up more. The green, airy charm of our street, sunlight through leaves, windsong through branches, felt heavier now, as if Karen had painted her paranoia across every tree. Ellie stopped sitting under the pergola entirely. "Dad," she whispered, "one night it's always right there. I can hear it." Angela flinched at every distant buzz. Even I felt tension coil in my chest, one I hadn't felt since those years designing countermeasures for contractors who operated in far less friendly forests. So I ran another test. I sat beneath the patio umbrella, sipping a smoothie while her drone drifted overhead. I activated a low-power pulse through a device disguised as a birdhouse. The drone jerked violently as if it had hit an invisible branch, then corrected, spun in place once, and retreated toward her neon-colored fortress. An hour later, an HOA-wide email arrived from Karen, titled Urgent Potential Foreign Interference. She warned the neighborhood to stay vigilant, claiming hostile signals were targeting community safety. The drone wasn't the only thing glitching. Karen was too, and when someone believes they're losing control, they reach for it harder. 2 mornings later, a patrol car rolled slowly under the arch of oak branches shading our street. Karen marched toward the officers, wearing a metallic purple tracksuit and a visor covered in rhinestones like a disco ball had declared itself sheriff. She pointed directly at my birdhouse. That's the device, she insisted. That's what attacked my aerial unit. One officer approached me while squirrels darted along the branches above. "Sir, mind if we take a look?" "Go ahead," I said. "It's wood screws and a perch." He checked it, shrugged, and muttered something about overactive imaginations. Karen, in the meantime, launched into a speech about signal warfare and digital insurgents. The officers left without filing anything. Karen didn't take the hint. That evening, flyers appeared taped to mailboxes, blurry screenshots of my patio birdhouse labeled "Suspect Device" in red letters. Neighbors rolled their eyes, but the tension thickened. If the HOA board wasn't going to rein her in, the situation would escalate on her terms. And I wasn't letting that happen. Because, unlike Karen, I understood exactly where the legal lines were, and I knew how to stay on the right side of them while still ending her campaign. The night I decided to end it, the air smelled like jasmine drifting from Angela's planters. Leaves rustled overhead, moonlight catching the curve of the birdhouse. I opened my laptop and activated the upgraded system, no longer just a jammer but a spoofer. It could whisper false coordinates to her drone, turn her commands into nonsense, and guide the machine anywhere I wanted. First, I mapped its routes. Tight circles over her yard, sweeping arcs above ours, slow passes over Tom's driveway, then a predictable glide along the row of trees toward the cul-de-sac entrance. Then I tested a soft redirect, just a nudge. The drone veered left, unnaturally corrected, then hesitated midair, as if confused. Perfect. What I needed next was an irresistible setup, and fate delivered. Karen, dressed in a blinding gold swimsuit and feathered shawl, settled onto her glitter-pink pool float with a drink in one hand and the controller in the other. Her yard glowed under lanterns shaped like tropical birds. Vines and palms swayed around her like an overgrown stage curtain. The drone lifted. I waited. When it crossed the fence line, I locked the signal. Its path bent not toward our yard this time, but toward the shimmering rectangle of water, reflecting her neon kingdom. She looked up, and the moment she screamed, I knew there was no going back. Karen called an emergency HOA meeting the next evening, and the whole neighborhood practically stampeded to the clubhouse lawn. The air was warm, fresh, drifting with the scent of cut grass from the field behind us. Lanterns hung from the oak branches above, swaying gently like they were waiting for a show, and Karen delivered. She arrived in a sequined magenta blazer, feathered earrings, brushing her shoulders, and a glitter clipboard she slapped onto a folding table like she was unveiling a crime dossier. Behind her laminated pages, blurry screenshots, a blown-up picture of my birdhouse, clipped to a neon poster board. "Residents," she announced dramatically, "we have a saboteur among us." A ripple of snickering traveled through the crowd. She pointed her rhinestone pen at me. "This man attacked my community security drone using an illegal device. My property was destroyed. Our safety compromised. I demand disciplinary action." Tom whispered behind me. "She looks like she's hosting a fashion police raid." I stepped forward only because the board looked overwhelmed, and Karen looked ready to crown herself marshal of the neighborhood. Before we accuse anyone, I said we should see what the drone was actually doing. That's when I plugged my USB into the projector. The lawn fell silent. Karen froze, eyes wide, feathers trembling. The lights dimmed. It was time. The first clip flickered onto the outdoor screen, shaky drone footage hovering above Brenda's backyard hot tub. She gasped, hands covering her mouth. Next clip, kids bouncing on a trampoline under the tall maples. Parents muttered angrily. Another clip, Tom grilling shirtless while adjusting sprinklers under his canopy of jasmine vines, immediately followed by the citation Karen sent him the next morning. Then, the footage sharpened into the moment that changed the entire crowd's posture. The drone hovering inches from Ellie's bedroom window, leaves brushing its rotors as it stared inside. Someone murmured, "That's not safety, that's stalking." The next slide showed a split-screen recording. On the left, the drone outside our house. On the right, Karen inside her living room, lime green controller in hand, sequined robe shimmering under her ceiling fan. The timestamp aligned perfectly. Karen lunged toward the projector. You manipulated that, those angles, those files, they're fake. Brenda stepped forward. Karen, I brushed my teeth and saw your drone right there. Are you calling me a liar, Marcy? The treasurer pointed at the screen. This isn't neighborhood safety. This is voyeurism with sparkles. Howard, the board president, finally stood. His voice carried through the trees. Karen, were you authorized to fly surveillance over private property? She opened her mouth, but nothing came out, because the truth had already filled the silence. Karen snapped. This is a witch hunt, she screamed, arms flailing so wildly her sequin sleeves sparkled like disco shrapnel. I gave this neighborhood structure. Order. Without me, this place falls apart. You need me. But the crowd didn't look afraid. They looked disgusted. Howard raised one hand calm as the wind shifting through the oak leaves. As board president, I move to suspend Karen's enforcement authority effective immediately, Marcy added. Second, hands went up across the lawn, neighbors tired of living under fluorescent tyranny. Karen staggered back. You can't do this. I am the HOA, Tom called out. Not anymore. You're not. Howard continued. Effective tonight, the use of drones for monitoring or enforcement is banned, and we'll be drafting a clause preventing any future misuse of surveillance. A few neighbors laughed quietly. Someone whispered, call it the Karen clause. The vote was unanimous. The moment the decision was announced, something strange happened. The wind rustled through the branches overhead, a soft cascade of leaves drifting down like the neighborhood itself was exhaling after holding its breath for too long. Karen's face flushed crimson. She grabbed her glitter clipboard feathers, bouncing as she stormed away, tripping on a lawn ornament flamingo, before disappearing into the shadows of her overgrown yard. No dramatic exit speech. No last threat. Just the hollow thud of her sandals against the pavement as her power evaporated behind her. And as the projector flicked off and the lights came back on, people didn't rush home. They stayed. They talked. They laughed. Because for the first time in a long time, the sky above our leafy cul-de-sac felt open again. The moment Karen's sandals vanished into the shadows of her yard, the entire crowd seemed to shift like someone had lifted a tarp off the neighborhood and let light back in. Instead of scattering home, people lingered under the tall oaks that shaded the clubhouse lawn. A few dragged out folding tables, someone wheeled over a cooler, and suddenly the meeting dissolved into something closer to a block gathering. Kids chased each other between the lampposts. Parents stood in loose circles, talking freely for the first time in months, and the air carried that light woody scent that hangs in the evening after the heat fades. No one kept glancing at the sky. No one ducked at a buzzing insect. The atmosphere felt different, open, breezy, like the neighborhood finally remembered what normal sounded like. Howard gathered the remaining board members by the projector stand. All right, he said, raising his voice just enough for the lawn to quiet again. Let's make this official. He held up a printed sheet, not a full bylaw revision, just a short emergency resolution, but the meaning was unmistakable. Effective immediately, he read all aerial surveillance over private property is prohibited within our HOA jurisdiction. No resident board member or committee may use drones or similar devices for monitoring or enforcement. All citations must be based on direct human observation only. Murmurs of approval rolled through the crowd. Howard added, with a tired but genuine smile, we'll formalize this language next week. For now, we restore privacy and peace. Someone from the back called name it after her. A dozen voices followed. The Karen clause laughter swept across the grass. Even Howard cracked up for a moment. The resolution wasn't just legal, it was symbolic. It sealed the end of her reign in plain daylight, in front of everyone she'd tried to intimidate. And for once, nobody was afraid she'd march out and undo it. Tom clapped me on the shoulder. Max, you saved this place, he said, half joking but sincere under it. That birdhouse deserves a monument. Several neighbors nodded, and someone snapped a picture of it from across the lawn as if it were a landmark. I didn't need recognition, but the relief in their faces, that feeling of finally being able to breathe, meant everything. Even Angela, leaning against the railing with her arms folded, looked lighter than she had in weeks. The conversations drifted naturally into small bursts of laughter as people recounted the absurdity of living under Karen's fluorescent tyranny. Brenda described the moment she realized the firefly outside her bathroom window wasn't a firefly at all. Someone else admitted they'd been trimming their hedges at night to avoid being filmed. One neighbor confessed she nearly bought blackout curtains for her backyard. Hearing all of it at once made the whole scenario sound even wilder than it felt while living through it. Ellie tugged my sleeve. Dad, she whispered, can we stay a little longer? Her voice didn't have that tightness it carried lately. She wasn't watching the treetops or scanning shadows. She was smiling just a kid in a green leafy neighborhood where the only buzzing came from cicadas. Angela slipped her hand into mine. Feels different now, she said softly, like the air's actually ours again. She wasn't exaggerating. Without that mechanical drone presence, the night sounded normal, crickets' leaves, whispering overhead, distant laughter. Even the glow from the string lights draped on the clubhouse looked warmer, gentler. Across the lawn, I caught sight of Greg Karen's husband standing alone near a planter box, surrounded by ferns. He looked exhausted, worn down in a way that didn't need explanation. He gave me a small nod, something between apology and relief. I returned it without hesitation. Whatever battles lay inside that house weren't mine to judge. A few neighbors asked how I'd figured out the drone patterns, how I knew what she was doing, how I managed to stop it without causing damage beyond what nature took care of. I didn't give details, just said I'd worked in tech once and recognized when someone crossed a line. That was enough. They didn't want secrets. They wanted closure. The board wrapped up the gathering by unplugging the projector and folding the tables, but no one rushed to leave. People walked home in small groups, talking under the canopy of trees, lit softly by porch lamps and fireflies that actually were fireflies this time. Angela and Ellie walked slightly ahead of me, their silhouettes moving through patches of moonlight, filtering between branches heavy with summer leaves. The quiet wasn't empty, it was peaceful. It was ours. At the foot of our driveway, Ellie looked up at me. "So, no more spying, no more spying," I said. Angela squeezed my hand again, the kind of squeeze that meant thank you, even if she didn't say it out loud. A warm breeze drifted through the yard, rustling the vines along our fence. The sky above the cul-de-sac felt wide open, just stars, just branches, just quiet. And as we stepped onto our porch, I realized something simple and undeniable. For the first time in weeks, the only thing watching us was the moon.